This is our representative from Dubuque. That's Chuck Isenhart.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here on this glorious Earth Day. Ranking Member Environmental Protection in the Iowa House, and I am a big fan of Ed Fallon. Here's why. He puts his shoes where his mouth is. You have to admire anybody who's willing to not just sit there and Monday morning quarterback, but willing to get people together like this for the causes we care about. I'm a Democrat. These issues historically have not been partisan issues. And I think we know that we need to mobilize people based on their values and not their party identity. And we all know that Ed Fallon represents the values that can bring people together. We just left the floor of the Iowa House for the past 90 minutes. I and 10 of my colleagues have spoken at points of personal privilege about Earth Day, led off by our Minority Leader Smith, who talked about the history of Earth Day, finished up by Representative Liz Bennett, who spoke from the book that Rob Hogue did on the topic of climate change. And it was a very powerful series of presentations that we're going to put together and make available to you on DVD so you can share with your folks around the state and the community. Because it shows that there are people there willing to stand up and speak on these issues, even if there is not a live bill or an appropriation in front of us necessarily where we can move our causes forward. And I think Senator Hogue maybe talked to you about a couple pieces they're trying to move forward. I'd like to just mention a couple maybe three things that are very tangible. One of the things that I learned from Ed on his trip were the reports of various people who seem to be strong-armed by the lawyers for the company that want to build this pipeline. And if you don't take our offer, you're not going to get anything better once we have powers of eminent domain and can come and take your land or strip an easement from you by force. I think that's a bad faith negotiating tactic if in fact you don't have the power of condemnation and eminent domain. So we're talking with Representative Kaufman, and I think maybe he's had some conversation with Senator Hogue about putting a provision in the bill that basically says you cannot use these bad faith negotiating tactics while the application is pending before the IUB. And if it comes to the attention of the IUB and the consumer advocate, that we maybe use that as evidence of why we shouldn't grant you your permit. And at least make you go back and start over and treat people humanely in the process. Don't know the future of that, but it's something tangible that we're going to try to work on. I'm from Dubuque, as I said. We don't have a proposed pipeline going through our community. In my research, we've noted, Representative Kelly and I, that there are in fact only 2 crude oil pipelines in Iowa. One goes straight down the middle and it's owned by the Koch brothers. They abandoned that pipeline, I think 3 years ago, because they found it was too dangerous to transport the product through because it corroded the pipeline and made it more subject to spills and disasters. Right now there's only one short line, about 20 miles, cutting from Illinois to Missouri across Keokuk and Lee County. So this notion that crude oil pipelines have traversed the states for decades without cause of concern is just not true, because we have not had those history of crude oil pipelines through the state. And it's for that reason that I, along with 14 of my colleagues in the House, on a bipartisan basis, sent a letter about 6 weeks ago to the Utilities Board saying that we expect you to require, at the company's expense, for them to do an environmental impact assessment to determine what the dangers and risks are of this pipeline, so at the very least we can mitigate against those if in fact a permit is required, and force you to make it as safe as possible for our communities and our land. To date, we have not gotten a response to that letter. And maybe some of you can start making some phone calls. If I brought the phone number with me, you could do it on your cell phone now. Not only asking the IUB to do this, but to get back to us, telling us why they won't be defenders of Iowans' environmental interests if in fact they aren't going to require this assessment. The Utilities Board, in my opinion, is one of the 2 most powerful in this state, next to the Board of Regents, which regulates our Regents institutions and the 3 universities. yet the transparency by which this board operates is very minimal at best, and Iowans deserve to know what goes into how they make their decisions. Some of the reports we've been hearing lately haven't been too promising in that respect. The last thing I just mentioned, we've had experience with these disasters in my neck of the woods over the last 6 weeks. You may have read about them. Big ethanol train derailment right up the river on the Iowa side, and a crude oil explosion on the Illinois side right across from Bellevue, which resulted in a fireball that lasted for several hours. Both were in very remote places, very difficult to get to, took many days and frankly millions of dollars to clean up. Thank God it didn't happen 3 weeks later when we had a flood to deal with, would have brought that stuff into the river. But it got the folks in Bellevue wondering, what about these crude oil trains going straight down the middle of our main street on the Canadian Pacific? And what if that had happened in our town? So it's starting to bring attention, folks, to this problem. As part of that, people use that as an opportunity to argue that, well, pipelines are safer than trains, so why don't we build pipelines? So my response is, it's not an either-or situation. It's not about the mode of transportation. It's about the safety of the product itself, and can it be transported safely via any mode? And we simply do not know the answer to those questions, and I'm inclined to say, if we don't find out the answers are good, that we shouldn't build a pipeline or transport it by rail. So we need to assess the risk associated with these independently and not make it an either-or thing. So am I against the pipeline? No. I think it's the product that we need to focus on. And even the folks up in North Dakota are starting to question that, because they recently, this week, adopted new legislation to put more stringent regulations in place in that regard. And I just wrap up with this observation. It's whether it comes to our clean air, carbon emissions, climate change, clean water, what we see is a lot of lip service in our state and in our country. I think a lot of people claim that they're involved in helping us solve these problems. And for a minority of those folks, it's true and it's genuine. But it's not enough. We need to do more. We need to do better. We need to do faster. We need more people like Ed Fallon, who are not just involved, but they're committed. And I think the best way for us to understand the difference between involvement and commitment in this old Iowa image, it's the difference between bacon and eggs. With eggs, the chicken was involved. With bacon, the pig was committed. Right? So, now am I asking anyone to put their life on the line for any of these causes? No. But guess what? It takes a little sacrifice and a little pain, and I think the folks here are willing to step up to the plate, and we need just to show Iowans how it can be done, to show that we can get from here to there without necessarily having to walk from one corner of the state to the other. So I appreciate your attention. Once again, congratulations, and thank you, Ed, for all your work.